Hi everyone, so I want to continue today talking specifically about some of the features of the heart that we're going to see. So first thing we're going to see when we're taking a look at our heart is a pericardium. So this pericardium is this nice connective tissue covering that surrounds the heart completely, and it really helps hold it to other structures that it's around it. It also has this pericardial fluid inside, which helps with some of the nutrition and all that different things for the heart here. So the outermost layer is called the pericardium, this nice connective tissue sac here. And then another one that I want to point out is this myocardium. So the myocardium is the muscle layer that's going to surround the heart, its ventricles and its atria. And this is really going to be what's responsible for that heartbeat that you hear and that pump of the blood that's coming. I want you to remember that the muscle in the heart is that cardiac muscle. And I also want you to take notice here that we have nice, thick muscle tissue surrounding our ventricles. That's really important here because our ventricles really are the ones that are moving that blood around. I also want you to take notice that this left ventricle here is slightly larger than our right ventricle. And that's because that's the ventricle that's pumping all your blood around your body. So let's take a look at some of these external structures. So I'm going to kind of go in order. So what I would like you to do is, as I'm talking through these, please take a look and kind of write down your own little definitions here for them. So the first thing I want to talk about is the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. So the superior and inferior vena cava are bringing blood in from the body that is deoxygenated. That's why these are pictured here in blue. So these are bringing blood from the body into our right atrium. Our right atrium and our right ventricle, this is going to be the the portions of the heart responsible for taking that deoxygenated blood and bringing it to the lungs. And the vein or vessel that's going to take that to the lungs is the pulmonary arteries. So I want you to take note here that this is the only artery that is going to hold deoxygenated blood. So the pulmonary artery, its job is to take blood to the lungs. So that's what the job of these pulmonary arteries. So let's review this side of the heart one more time. So superior and inferior vena cava bring the blood in through the body into the right atrium. The right atrium and the right ventricle are holding that deoxygenated blood, bringing it to our pulmonary arteries, which is going to bring that blood to the lungs to get oxygenated. So if we take a look here on the left side of our heart, this is where we're going to deal with oxygenated blood. Our pulmonary veins, again, let's take note here that the pulmonary veins are the only veins that are going to carry oxygenated blood. So the pulmonary veins bring the oxygenated blood in from the lungs into the left atrium. So in the left atrium and the left ventricle, we have oxygenated blood getting ready to pump through the entire body. And that's going to happen through this large vessel right here called the aorta. So the left atrium and the left ventricle hold that oxygenated blood. We're going to pump it into the aorta here. That's going to bring blood to the rest of the body. So the job of the aorta is to bring blood to the rest of the body. So let's review this side one more time. Our pulmonary veins are going to take oxygenated blood and bring it to the left atrium. The left atrium and the left ventricle hold this oxygenated blood, and they're going to pump it through the rest of the body, and that's going to travel through the aorta. So the aorta is going to deliver that blood, separate into many different arteries here to bring that blood to the whole body to distribute that oxygen. So if we take a look here, there's one more term that I haven't talked about, and this is the apex. So the apex is found at the base of the heart right here. Kind of looks like a nice little point. So at that point of that heart, that is called the apex. So let's take a look at some of the internal structures now. So you'll see that I defined some of these structures here, so make sure we get those down. But let's follow that pathway again. So if we take a look here, we see our superior and inferior vena cava entering the right atrium. And then we're also going to see another structure here, and that's going to be our tricuspid valve. So if you take a look over here, we can see that our tricuspid valve is going to divide the right atria and the right ventricle. So the tricuspid valve, we go through there to get into the right ventricle. And that's going to bring us to this pulmonic valve. So the pulmonic valve leads to the pulmonary arteries. And this is going to be blood moving to the heart. So moving to the lungs, sorry. So the blood coming from the right ventricle is going to go through this pulmonic valve and bring blood to the lungs. One thing I want to note here is that these valves are really important to keep the blood flowing in the same direction. So the point of these valves here is to keep the blood going in one direction. So once we go through the tricuspid valve, there's no going back into the right atrium. We're going to stay in the right ventricle until we can go through that pulmonary valve. Once we go through the pulmonary valve, there's no coming back into the right side of the heart. So let's take a look at the left side of the heart. So the pulmonary veins have brought oxygenated blood into the left atrium. And now we go through what we call the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. And this divides the left atria to the left ventricle. And then we're finally going to go through the aortic valve. So the aortic valve is going to have the blood moving to the body. So again, once we go from the right atrium through that mitral valve into the left ventricle, there's no going back. Same thing here with the aortic valve. Once that blood from the left ventricle goes through that aortic valve, there's no coming back. We go through the aorta, through the body systems until we can come back through the superior and inferior vena cava here. So again, what I've been doing here is going through all of those different steps of blood flow. So it can be pretty complex, but it's nice to know that it's one cycle. There's no multiple parts moving here. It's always going to be the same of how that blood moves. So if we take a look at this very basic diagram here, we can see the blood from the body is coming up, going into the right atrium, going down into the right ventricle, going around up into the lungs. From the lungs, it's coming into the left atrium, to the left ventricle, to the rest of the body. So I like to start at the body so we can bring deoxygenated blood in there. So that's usually how I will start when I talk about it, but know if you can start anywhere. So if we start in the left atrium, we know that it's going to follow the same cycle. So let's take a look at more complex here. Inferior superior vena cava coming into the right atrium, going through that tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. That right ventricle going through that pulmonic valve into the pulmonary arteries to the lungs. Coming back from the lungs, we go through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium through that mitral valve into this nice left ventricle. Going through that aortic valve to the aorta, going to the body, and then we'll come back through again that superior and inferior vena cava. So these are a lot of pictures, so let's put this in step-by-step directions. Oxygen poor blood, so step 1, oxygen poor blood travels through the veins to the heart and enters the right atrium. Step 2, the right atrium contracts, squeezing the blood down into the right ventricle. Step 3, blood is then sent to the lungs to gather oxygen and returns to the heart through the left atrium. Step 4, the left atrium contracts, squeezing blood down into the left ventricle. Step 5, blood is then sent through the arteries to the body to deliver oxygen to all your organs. And then again, that process is going to repeat over and over again. So if you have questions on blood flow, please reach out to me specifically. And if you missed our diagram yesterday, again, please reach out and we will go over this again step by step. If you have any questions, please let me know.